Welcome in, everybody, to the second episode of our new show here at Fantasy Pros called Ask the Experts. That's right. I'm your girl, Lauren Carpenter, with my beautiful co-host, Tara Roberts, and we are bringing to you, like I said, our second show of answering your questions. Now, if you do have a burning question for us here at Fantasy Pros, you can get your question answered by us and have some analysis to go along with it. But there are a few things that you need to do in order for us to be able to see them and choose them for this show. The first one is you got to have a question. Of course, that's kind of obvious. Kind of the way to go. But the second thing is, if you post your question on, for example, Instagram, make sure you're following us on Instagram. If you post it on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. And also make sure that you have the hashtag #AskTheExperts on there. Otherwise, your question will not be eligible to get on the show. And this is one of the things that we both love to do, is helping you out with your fantasy drafts, helping you out for your fantasy season. Because that's right, after kickoff, we are going to be coming to you every Friday on our YouTube channel. So make sure you get those in, have those questions lined up, ready to go all season long, not just draft prep, not those only. We're going to do this whole entire season. So let's go ahead and dive right in, because we had some great questions that she and I really had some fun diving into. So let's go ahead and hop right into it here. This is Robbie Menard Creates from YouTube. He wants to know, Davante Adams or Alvin Kamara at third overall in PPR?
So this is a good question. I love that we're kicking it off with this. So it's obviously Kamara for me. I don't know if we're going to disagree with each other too much on this one. I do love Davante Adams. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. He's my guy. But for a number 3 pick to miss out on a top 3 running back it's going to crucially affect your team. And when you think about it, you're probably going to miss out on Davante. So unfortunately, if you got a top 3 pick and you're taking a running back like Kamara, you're not going to get Davante when you come back around to your pick, but you can still get somebody who's close to that caliber. You can get a Calvin Ridley, but you won't be able to get an Alvin Kamara on the back end of that second round. So for me, I'm going with Alvin Kamara there.
Yeah, I agree with you here. The one thing I forgot to put 2 and 2 together in my head is, Robbie, this is how very much she believes in taking Alvin Kamara at the third. As a Packers fan, she's passing on Davante Adams on the third. I agree with her. The running back caliber drops off a cliff the further down you get into drafts, and you really need to have a stud at that position. And I love Alvin Kamara this year. I mean, I love him all the time. He's spectacular. So yeah, Alvin Kamara here for me. It is hard to pass up on a guy like Davante Adams, but like you said, there are other players that should be available to you when it comes all the way back around. And I love Calvin Ridley this year as well. Alrighty. Tim Rand, also from YouTube. Is drafting Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey a big mistake?
So I'll kick this one off because it'll be a little bit controversial because the question is,
I like
is it a big mistake? And I don't think it's a big mistake. I'm not a fade CMC guy or girl, but I am a CMC 101 person, but I don't think it's a huge mistake to draft Dalvin Cook over CMC. When you look at the situations that they're in, Dalvin Cook is in a pretty stable situation. Nothing changed. If anything, they kind of upgraded their team a little bit more in the draft, maybe trending towards a little bit better of a year. But in terms of his usage, he's going to be looking at the same situation. With CMC, he's coming off the injury, and maybe they want to, with this extra game that we have this year coming up, that maybe they want to kind of slow down the usage on him a little. They've got a new situation where they've got a lot more talent at receiver. They've added Terrace Marshall, who was looking amazing in preseason. And it's possible that they want to, with Sam Darnold coming in and having a good connection with Robbie Anderson as well, maybe lean more on the pass game and not have to force so much to CMC. So that usage, that gap between them may not be as drastic. I don't think it's a huge mistake to make that pick.
Yeah, big mistake. I would say I agree with you there. I mean, it's not a huge mistake. Would I personally do it? No, I'm going to go Christian McCaffrey all day long. I don't want to deal with the headache of Dalvin Cook, but that's just a personal preference. I mean, that's kind of what those top studs are, is just who would you rather have on your team? Because one of my favorite phrases is you're splitting hairs with a hatchet here, because we don't know what Christian McCaffrey's sustainability and durability is going to look like. So you do you. You do you on who you feel you want the most on your team. I say CMC. She says Dalvin Cook. I think both are spectacular, Tim. So you do you on that front. Let's move right along to Rowan Barrett III. This sounds incredibly fancy. I feel like I need a cup of tea. Or Rowan Barrett III is like a sword-wielding Highlander. I'm not sure which one. But either way, This
like
is a cool name, especially as the third Rowan Barrett. All right. He has the 7th pick, 12-team, full PPR. Would you go? Now we have to pick one out of this. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Ezekiel Elliott, Davante Adams, or Aaron Jones. So 7th pick, 12-team, full PPR. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Ezekiel Elliott, Davante Adams, or Aaron Jones. Pick one, Tara, go.
I promise I'm not being a homer, but it is going to be Aaron Jones for me. For me, he's just such an underrated superstar. And of the people on that list, besides maybe Zeke and maybe Eckler as well, but not Chubb. And I feel like he's someone who arguably can finish as that RB1. When you look at the amount of usage that he's going to get, I know a lot of people are fearful of him because he's someone who thrives off efficiency, but that's not going to change. And with the exit of Jamal Williams, he does get an increase, a little bump up in PPR. There is A.J. Dillon there who may be more of a factor when it comes to standard leagues because he could get some goal line carries, and he is looking fantastic in preseason as well. But in terms of PPR, it's still Aaron Jones. He's still that guy for me.
Yeah, see, I kind of knew you were going to take Aaron Jones, but I also like Aaron Jones as well. So I think the way that I want to answer this, for me personally, I would go Ezekiel Elliott or I would go Aaron Jones. I do not believe that the stinkiness that we saw from Ezekiel Elliott is going to continue into 2021. So I'm not really worried about that. He is involved in the passing game as well. So for full PPR, it's great. But really, honestly, I'll tell you who I think you should avoid in that first one. Davante Adams, like we just talked about earlier in this video, simply because of the running back talent that falls off very quickly. Nick Chubb, also because it's more of that PPR style as opposed to standard. So you have a little bit better options when it comes to that. Not that Nick Chubb is terrible. And you might be able to get away with Austin Eckler at the turn. Like when it comes back around, you may be able to snag Austin Eckler. And now you have 2 stud running backs on your squad, and you don't even have to worry about dealing with the running backs unless you want to take shots on later guys like Damian Harris, who just got rid of Sony Michel, which is fantastic news. Kenyon Drake, especially in PPR, with his role as the goal line, or with Josh Jacobs as that ground and pound line of scrimmage guy. So you have a little bit of options, but not an RB1 option later on. So I say agreed. Go Zeke or Jones, whichever one you're more comfortable with, and then save Eckler possibly when it comes back around in the second round. All right, moving right along here. We have Brian _Ferrulo 4. Now, I do think of Jason Derulo every time I see this guy's name, but he's not. He is Brian Ferrulo 4 from Instagram, and he wants to know Derrick Henry or Ezekiel Elliott in full PPR.
So I love this question. I love that we got it.
It's
I love that
hard.
Yeah.
I know. Great question.
Because it could go so many different ways. And for me, it's Derrick Henry. And I love this question because people tend to fear Derrick Henry in PPR. And I get it. Yeah, the PPR does knock him down a little bit. But when you're comparing him to Zeke, if you go back and you look at the numbers, first of all, side note, you do have to put aside that kind of, there's a lot of wear and tear argument with Derrick Henry. When you're comparing him to Zeke, it's kind of the same situation. So we kind of put that aside in terms of this argument of versus Zeke versus Derrick Henry. But put that aside, and we put aside, what happened with Zeke last year. Looking at the 2019 numbers for Zeke, comparing it to the 2020 numbers for Henry, it is awful close. Okay. Yeah. It is very close. So there's not a clear cut, oh no, it's PPR. If we see the same thing from Derrick Henry, and we see, Zeke's top usage, they're going to be about the same. So unless you fear someone falling off a cliff versus the other, I do go with Derrick Henry on this.
Yeah, and I'm going to lean Ezekiel Elliott. I kind of made my case for Zeke already in the previous, question, so I don't want to just droll on and repeat myself here. But you did get me thinking here on that term of everyone's kind of scared of Derrick Henry in PPR instead of in standard. Well, don't forget, touchdowns are worth more points than a reception. So with the addition of Julio Jones on that field, defenses are now forced to have a reckoning with, is it going to be AJ Brown? Is it going to be Julio Jones? Could it be, Anthony Ferkser that comes along and, snipes some red zone targets, which what does that do? Spreads defenses out. They no longer are just going to be stacking the box to keep Derrick Henry bottled up, which gives him more opportunity to be even more productive, which is kind of terrifying, but awesome. So really, again, a situation of splitting hairs with a hatchet. I don't think either of those choices are wrong. So I kind of like Zeke a little bit better. You're leading Derrick Henry on that one. Honestly, those are two wonderful players. You got our perspective on both. All right, another one from Instagram here, Tara. This is from Connor Burns. He is not the third, nor is his name Rowan, but he is a Connor Burns, one of my really good friends. Last name is Burns, of no relation, from Instagram. Would you rather have the third or the eighth pick in a 12-team redraft? Tara, you're up.
All right, so I will say the eighth pick because I don't even know what the third pick looks like in an actual draft, because unfortunately everything that I've done this year has been the 10th round or later. So
doesn't that happen? I feel like that happens to me all the time. I am always like 10 to 12, or I'm like 9 or 10 if it's a 10 person league. It is obnoxious, and I'm like, okay, what's happening here? Who did I upset in the fantasy world?
Exactly. So, I'll argue for the eighth spot. It's that area for me is a good place for you to be able to have a lot of variety. The third spot, unfortunately, for me, if it's a 1 QB league, you're locked into taking your running back there, like we've talked about. If it's a super flex league, you're locked into taking your quarterback right there. Maybe you're going Kyler Murray or Josh Allen. But from the eighth spot, you can do whatever you want, really. I mean, it's kind of the world is your oyster. So I love being able to look at those first 7 spots and be able to decide, what strategy am I taking for my whole draft based off of this.
Yeah, I like it too. And I don't mind picking from the eighth, but I'm one of those people who doesn't necessarily love having variety. So I'll go ahead and stick with that third so that I know who my first choice is going to be at that third position. So then I can worry about draft tilting later on. But I would really like to have one of those top 3 stud running backs on my team. So from the third, I think I wouldn't mind doing that. Plus, as you get further down in your draft, I really like being able to pick close to one another, because that really helps my planning strategy out a little bit more. So I think that's why I would lean a little bit more of the third. But again, I tend to not pick a draft spot. I have to mock from every single one, because without a doubt, I always get something that I don't like. So I prefer not to have a preference in the first place going into it. So that's my take on that one. One more for me, and then I'm going to kick this over to Tara. This is another one from Instagram, and this is from Vinny Jr. And this is an interesting one. We kind of touched on this in our first episode, but this is also about stacks in PPR redraft. So what are our thoughts on it? Which ones are okay? Which ones we should avoid? For example, he brought up Davante Adams and Aaron Jones, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and then Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. Like, these are some of those examples of those stacks that he was talking about. What do you think about this, Sarah?
So for me, stacks are traditionally quarterback, wide receiver. I do enjoy a good stack, particularly in DFS. I don't aim for it necessarily in season long, but I'll take it if it comes to me and it looks pretty. So I would say that, I don't mind taking that kind of stack. I think it's cool when you can get someone like a Justin Herbert and a Keenan Allen. I won't reach for it if you can make it fit within the right draft area. That's what makes sense to me. I do avoid combining a wide receiver and a running back unless it's kind of like a crazy situation. I will say that I kind of fell into having Davante Adams and Aaron Jones on the team last year just because of a weird running back situation. And it was honestly a cheat code, but I do not advise it. It does not usually work. It limits your upside because, if something happens within the offense, you're just limiting your upside. You could go with the unique situation of a quarterback running back, maybe in PPR with someone like Herbert and Eckler, maybe with a running back that catches a lot of passes. But outside of that quarterback wide receiver, I would tend to avoid it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like having 2 pass catchers from the same team on my fantasy team. DFS, like you said, I love that you brought that up. I don't mind that for DFS at all. But when it comes for season long, that creates a problem at bye weeks. My stacks that I look for are quarterback, receiver. Those are really the only stacks that I would advise doing. Again, I don't love it for redraft, but I do like it for DFS. So I hope that helps you, Vinny Jr. from Instagram. And Tara, she's going to take over for me because I don't want to ask all the questions. So she's going to take over.
All right. So let's start off with a question from Twitter. So the American Football Safa wants to know our expert thoughts on David Montgomery. He says, obviously higher upside in standard leagues, but is he worth taking rounds 2 to 3 in PPR? Finished last year on a high, and will that carry over? So Lauren, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so this is a question I feel like we've gotten a lot, and I may have a take on this that other people don't agree with. So I'm glad this question came up. Okay, so the thing about David Montgomery that makes me hesitant to really want to put him in that upper stratosphere, if you will, is he did really well. He did end on a high note, but that high note was against defenses that were really bad against the run, really, really bad in his last 5 weeks. So he did capitalize and he scored double-digit fantasy points. It's not like he, put up a stinker, which was, good that we got to see him at least take advantage of these poor defenses. But in the first 7 weeks, he was the RB20. I mean, that's not great. And then in weeks, I think we added 2 more weeks onto that week 9. He inched up a little bit to RB14. So for me, 2 to 3 is a little too expensive for my personal squad. I don't have enough faith in his consistency is what I should say with that one. So 2, way too high. 3, 4 or later is where I feel really comfortable taking David Montgomery.
So I half agree with you. I do think 2 is too high. In the second round, you've still got great options there,
right?
On the back end of the second round. Once we get into the third round, personally, I've been taking him a lot because I am a David Montgomery truther. Okay, so I'll admit that. I've been taking him up at the back end of the third round, and I have seen him creep up a little more as I think people are starting to get a little more aware. Shameless plug: I do have a TikTok on David Montgomery if you want a little info on him, but on the Fantasy Pros TikTok channel. But David Montgomery's ADP is fluctuating anywhere from RB 17 to 20. Sometimes it's slipping down to 16. I'm super comfortable with him on the high end on that. On the low end, I'm still comfortable, but not as much. But I still think he's a great value because he is factually the lead clear back in Chicago. And as you start to get further back into those later mid-second RBs, it gets a little bit shaky in terms of, are they actually the clear lead back? And what kind of tips the scale for me is Tariq Cohen still having problems with the ACL injury, still come back from that. So it really puts Montgomery in a position to pick up right where he left off. And I like that. So I anticipate the schedule's not fantastic, but it's not horrific. So I should see a nice little mid RB2 area for him.
Yeah, I would love to have Montgomery as my flex, but unfortunately, I think he's going to go too high for a flex option. So I may be out of luck this year on David Montgomery.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it too, but yeah, I know I'm a little bit biased on that. But moving on to the next question, we've got AJ Carry-On from Twitter as well. Who do you value more in Dynasty League, Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins? This is a really good question. I see it a lot.
Okay, this one is real hard, but I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk here. So the reason I am going Brandon Ayuk is that the situation for me in Cincinnati, honestly, this really has to do with me not understanding Cincinnati. So like by default, I'm just going to go to Ayuk because we don't really know what is going to happen between T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. Now, there's been this speculation, Jamar Chase, he's looked slow, blah, blah. He didn't play football for over a year, and the last time he played was on the college level. So he's literally coming in as a rookie in the NFL, having not played for over a year. Give the guy a little time. I think he'll be just fine. So for dynasty purposes, I mean, even for redraft purposes too, I think I'm just going to go ahead and lean Brandon Ayuk because I worry that Jamar Chase is going to eventually take over the T. Higgins role. That's the only thing that concerns me.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an extremely close call. I think that's what
it is. It's like a tiny bitty baby hair.
Yeah. So I think I lean with you in Dynasty towards Ayuk for all the reasons that you said. So I won't elaborate hugely on it. But I think we can make this a two-part question because we did also get the question as well.
Mhm.
I think from a redraft perspective from Alex Espinoza on Twitter as well, asking the same question, but for
Mhm.
redraft. And for redraft, for me, I know you said it's still Ayuk for you, but for me
Mhm.
in redraft, it's actually Higgins.
Mhm.
On the flip side of that, I think that we might see a little bit more of a struggle from Chase, and it's not knocking him long term because I
Mhm.
completely agree with you. I mean, the talent level is there. It's just taking him a second to get back into the field of football.
Mhm.
And we know that Burrow is struggling a little bit, and it might take him a little while to get over this recovery, and he might lean on what he knows from last year in Higgins. So I think kind of in a vacuum for me, it's going to be Higgins for this year. The talent level is there. He's more stable, and I think it's just a better situation for him from that perspective.
I think you might be swaying me towards the Higgins way, but I'm gonna stand my ground and I'm gonna stick with Brandon Ayuk for both.
Nice. I love how we're so close to this and like it's
I know, yeah.
minute details.
Tiny.
So but moving on to the next question we have from Instagram, it's Max Satterfield saying that he was offered Travis Kelce and Terry McLaurin for DeAndre Hopkins and Waller. What should he do?
Okay, we are on totally opposite sides of this. I love this. Okay, I don't really see a clear loser in my opinion. So for me, the side of the trade that I would want to be on, I want to go, I am going to Travis Kelce, Terry McLaurin. That's who I want on my team. So Travis Kelce, it's just so impossible to get away with how friggin' amazing he is. And then Terry McLaurin is so incredibly consistent and he can get the job done at wide receiver, no matter who is at quarterback. My Pomeranian could be throwing him the ball and he'll still get it done. So for me, the value here and the fantasy reward is going to be the Travis Kelce, Terry McLaurin side.
So I love Terry McLaurin. I really do. Obviously, who doesn't love Travis Kelce?
I know, okay.
And I promise I'm not being biased again. I feel like I always have to put a disclaimer on that. But you mentioned we are on the opposite side. I would stick with Hopkins and Waller. And my reasoning for this is that, yes, Kelce is the bigger producer. He is going to get more fantasy points. But even with Waller, when you break it down to a positional advantage, even if you're going with Waller, you're still having a huge advantage over all the other tight ends except for potentially Kittle. So when you look at that in a vacuum and you're saying, okay, well, I'm still going to be greatly advantaged on the tight end position. And then you flip over to DeAndre Hopkins versus Terry McLaurin. You do have someone that you know is going to be a top 5 receiver in Hopkins. So we feel like that's a guarantee there. And I love Terry and I'm very hopeful. And I think he's going to do fantastic with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but we are hopeful. We are not unfortunately guaranteed. So I think I would stick with DeAndre Hopkins on that and not take the gamble.
Yeah, and I see that perspective too, but I don't know. I would be so tempted. I'm gonna stick with mine. Kelce and McLaurin. Just all I saw was Kelce. That's all I care about.
Yeah. He's great. So I don't blame you at all on that one. But moving on to the last question that we have, and I was very excited to see this one because it might not be relevant now, but who knows? Okay, we don't know. Sean Payton hasn't officially said anything. But our last question is from YouTube, and I am sorry if I messed your name up.
I was gonna wonder, like, are you gonna try to take a stab at this because that is cojones, girl. Get it?
Anupov Biswas. I feel like I'm fairly.
I feel like
there.
that was great. Yeah.
Nice.
Nailed it.
So his or her question is no one interested in Taysom as a potential top 10 quarterback on his rushing alone if he wins the spot? So in the hypothetical world that he wins the spot, I don't think it's happening, but let's go hypothetical because we need to know the answer to this. Even if he won the spot, I don't see him as a potential top 10 this season. And the reasoning is if you look at Lamar Jackson, that was the QB 10. And if you look at Taysom Hill and take those four games that he played last year. So we've got like a 4-game sample, but unfortunately that 4-game sample was against Atlanta, Denver, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. So best case scenario, if we took those numbers and we put it out over a 17-game season, unfortunately, he still wouldn't actually reach Lamar Jackson's numbers. And I don't think we're going to get, unfortunately, he would have to face an entire season of ups and downs and highs and lows and tough schedules. And I don't think that that's the potential. We're basically would be looking at him at his highest potential versus what he could actually be.
Agreed. I don't think that Taysom Hill, if he were to be the starter, it gets anywhere near top 10 at all. No.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that it's not going to happen anyway. But in the event that it does, it was good for us to answer it and see how we
hypotheticals, man. You never know. The future is uncertain.
Yes. So that wraps everything up for us. We wanted to thank you so much for tuning in to our episode of Ask the Experts. I am Tara Roberts. You can find me on Twitter at It's Tara Time, and I am with my girl Lauren Carpenter, and you can find her at Stepmom Lauren on Twitter. Remember to tune in all season long. Laura and I will be here to answer your questions every single Friday after the kickoff of the regular season. And do not forget to subscribe to all Fantasy Pros social media channels and use the hashtag #AskTheExperts to make your question eligible for us to answer them. We're happy that you got to join us today, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.